Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling.
Based on today, when you talk to Vladimir Zelensky, what's your advice to
make a deal?
Make the deal.
Gotta make a deal. Yeah.
Following a highly anticipated and high-stakes summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, which took place in the dramatic and symbolic location of Anchorage, Alaska, President Donald Trump delivered a profound, consequential, and unilateral redefinition of the United States' long-standing position on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. This new
people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposite.
If you had to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10?
So I think the meeting was a 10 in the sense that we got along great, and it's good when, two...
New policy direction was not presented in a formal, structured, or traditional press conference with a full press corps. Rather, it was unveiled through a striking one-on-one televised interview with the prominent Fox News host, Hannity. The broadcast was far more than a routine post-meeting summary. It served as a momentous and deeply significant unilateral declaration of a new foreign policy doctrine. This doctrine placed the entire and seemingly sole burden of responsibility for achieving a peace deal squarely on the shoulders of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump's pointed and deliberate remarks signaled a profound and dramatic departure from the long-standing, unwavering, and bipartisan Western commitment to supporting a democratic ally against what has been widely and consistently condemned as a clear act of unprovoked aggression. Instead of adhering to this established posture, the new approach deliberately prioritized a pragmatic and transactional resolution to the conflict, placing a premium on a speedy conclusion over the foundational principles of international law, national sovereignty, and the moral integrity of a democratic defense against an invader. This shift represented not just a change in tactics, but a fundamental challenge to the post-World War II liberal international order that America had helped to construct, an order built on the premise that sovereignty and democratic self-determination are sacrosanct and that aggression cannot be rewarded. Trump's deliberate and calculated framing of the war as a terrible conflict in which both are losing a lot was a highly significant and strategic rhetorical maneuver designed to alter the public perception of the conflict's moral dimensions. By consciously creating a false moral and material equivalence between the invading force, which is actively and illegally occupying another nation's territory, and the invaded sovereign nation, which is simply defending its internationally recognized borders, he deftly and effectively sidestepped any need to assign blame, condemn Russia's illegal actions, or even acknowledge the fundamental and stark imbalance of power, justice, and responsibility. This particular perspective, which has been a consistent element of his public discourse for years, effectively normalizes the conflict and systematically undermines the moral basis for continued Western support for Ukraine. The powerful and dangerous implication is that the war is merely a tragic but inevitable two-sided dispute, rather than an illegal, unprovoked invasion by a nuclear power. This particular rhetoric has shown a strong and consistent resonance with a specific segment of the American populace that has grown weary of foreign entanglements and the considerable financial and human costs of military aid, stemming from decades of interventions in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. It provides a seemingly logical and straightforward justification for ending American involvement without the appearance of betraying a key democratic ally or abandoning international norms. The narrative deliberately shifts the focus from a clear and unambiguous moral imperative to a purely pragmatic calculus of cost and benefit, with a clear tilt toward ending the conflict at almost any cost, even if that cost is paid in Ukrainian territory and sovereignty. The summit itself was a masterclass in diplomatic optics for both Trump and Putin, carefully orchestrated to project a specific image to the world and to specific audiences. The intentional choice of Anchorage, a U.S. territory yet physically close to Russia, serve as a powerful and highly symbolic neutral ground on American soil. This location was specifically selected to signal a bilateral, leader-to-leader approach that intentionally bypassed traditional European diplomatic venues and multilateral institutions like NATO, thereby positioning the U.S. as the singular and primary arbiter of the conflict, without the need for its allies. The visual spectacle of the Russian leader receiving a formal red carpet welcome and being personally chauffeured by Trump in his presidential limousine, affectionately known as the Beast, was a potent and carefully curated message that spoke volumes without a single word. It communicated to the world and to America's allies that Putin, despite his status as an international pariah and his nation's pariah status following the invasion, was a legitimate, essential, and respected partner for the U.S. in resolving global crises. The deliberate absence of a joint press conference with journalists and the remarkable brevity of their public remarks served to deepen the mystery and rampant speculation, fostering a widespread sense that a significant, though still unannounced, framework had been established behind closed doors, away from public scrutiny. Trump's effusive characterization of the dialogue as a 10 out of 10 and very warm was not a detached, objective diplomatic assessment. It was a subjective personal endorsement, a hallmark of his unique foreign policy approach, which consistently places personal rapport and perceived loyalty above formal diplomatic protocol and the principles of statecraft that have guided U.S. foreign policy for generations. The core of Trump's post-summit message was a direct and unsparing challenge to the government in Kyiv. The phrase, "It's really up to President Zelensky to get it done," which he repeated multiple times during the interview, became the central and most controversial element of his commentary, acting as a direct and public directive. It was an explicit public demand for Ukraine to take the lead in seeking a resolution, even at the potential cost of painful and significant territorial concessions to the aggressor. This was not merely a suggestion. It was an act of public shaming and pressure on an ally, made in front of an international audience. In a remarkable act of self-appointed mediation, Trump offered to personally attend the next meeting between Zelensky and Putin, stating, "I'd be at that next meeting. Not that I want to be there, but I want to make sure it gets done." This offer, delivered with a sense of personal sacrifice, underscored his perception of his own indispensable role as a master dealmaker, a persona cultivated throughout his business career and central to his political identity. He deliberately framed his potential involvement as a selfless sacrifice, not that I want to be there, thereby making his presence seem all the more essential and unavoidable for a successful outcome. This particular approach bypasses established diplomatic norms, where a nation's foreign policy is meticulously executed through a professional and experienced corps of diplomats, often over a long period of time. Instead, it places the entire process in the hands of a single, charismatic individual operating outside traditional channels and with a focus on personal influence and the perception of a quick win, a style that fundamentally rejects the complexity and institutional weight of international relations. When Hannity asked what specific advice he would offer to the Ukrainian president, Trump's response was a blunt, unequivocal, and uncompromising directive: make the deal. Gotta make a deal. He justified this position by pointing to the vast and undeniable power imbalance between the two countries, stating in stark and simplistic terms, Russia's a very big power, and they're not, referring to Ukraine. This cold, transactional assessment was not merely an objective observation of the facts on the ground. It was a deliberate form of public diplomatic pressure. It clearly implied that Ukraine, as the demonstrably weaker party, had no viable choice but to be realistic and accept an outcome that might be less than ideal to end the devastating fighting. This message was a direct and devastating blow to Zelensky's negotiating leverage. It signaled to Russia that a key U.S. political figure believed Ukraine should be willing to make significant concessions, which would inevitably encourage Russia to hold firm and offer fewer compromises. Trump also subtly but effectively connected this pressure to the substantial U.S. military aid provided to Ukraine, suggesting that this support was not an unconditional tool for achieving a victory. Instead, It was framed as a bargaining chip to be used to force a quick conclusion to the conflict, regardless of the terms. His comments resonated deeply with a domestic audience tired of the financial and military assistance to foreign nations, providing a seemingly straightforward solution that sidestepped the moral complexities of a righteous defense against aggression and framed the conflict as an unnecessary financial burden on American taxpayers. The geopolitical consequences of Trump's interview were profound, far-reaching, and immediate. For Ukraine, the public pressure to negotiate from a position of weakness was a devastating and demoralizing blow. It unequivocally emboldened Putin, who could now clearly see a potential fissure in the Western alliance and a powerful U.S. voice advocating for a quick, albeit potentially unfavorable, peace. For U.S. allies in Europe, the interview was a moment of profound and widespread alarm. Leaders in Paris, Berlin, and London would have viewed Trump's unilateral approach as a direct threat to the transatlantic alliance that has served as the bedrock of post-war European security. The very idea of a separate U.S.-Russia agreement, potentially negotiated without their full participation and at the expense of Ukraine's territorial integrity, raised fundamental and unsettling questions about the future of European security and the reliability of the United States as a global partner. In essence, the interview was a form of parallel diplomacy conducted through the media, intentionally circumventing formal diplomatic channels and systematically undermining the collective effort of the West. It was a clear and unambiguous signal to allies and adversaries.